You're listening to the Walled Garden podcast. This podcast is a part of the Walled Garden online community, a community dedicated to sharing and discussing philosophy, beliefs, ideas, and creativity among all types of people, in order to gain new insight on some of life's biggest questions and make the most of how we live. We appreciate you joining us.
I want to welcome all of you here today. This is the final of our inspiration sessions, I guess, for each of us to share our thoughts about the vision for the Walled Garden, the community and the podcast, everything that we're doing. And so obviously today we're hearing from Sharon, and this is a really beautiful session because I mean, Sharon, I've been thinking about how to introduce Sharon, and I'm going to use as few words as possible. So here's what I'm going to say. I've been really thinking about a thought that Seneca has presented lately. His thought is that with the way that we teach people, you want to be like an archer. You want to hit the target every time. That means choosing the student carefully. It means choosing the way that you teach the student carefully. It means choosing your words carefully. And when it comes to teaching, when it comes to sharing wise words, when it comes to just sharing wisdom, that's what I just said. Sharon knows how to hit the target every time. And I've never met somebody who knows more how to hit the target with her words. Many of you may have seen my most recent episode where I've introduced my first book, The Poet and the Sage, which is now released. And that book would not have been written, I can confidently say, without Sharon's careful mentorship and her nourishing of my own gifts. It would not have been written. And for that, I am always grateful to Sharon and her very careful attention to a young student who was, from the day he met her, interested in more mentorship from her. So Sharon, thank you very much for accepting my own call to you, for coming along on this journey, the Walled Garden with us. I'm really honored to have you here. And I'm looking forward to hearing your own contribution today. So I'm going to butt out and let you take over.
Thank you. Those are beautiful words. So I'll speak a little bit about who I am and how I imagine fitting into the Walled Garden. First of all, baseline, great day, great life, great moment, great now. Great that we are gathered for these inaugural Walled Garden meetings to express our vision for this venture. I am so honored to be part of this experiment of the mind and the heart. And I'm just going to give you a very unvarnished version of myself, because that's the only kind I know how to give. Just by way of short introduction, for those of you who do not know me, I'm Sharon Lebelle. I'm best known for the perennial classic, The Art of Living, the Classic Manual on Virtue, Happiness, and Effectiveness. Here it is. It's a modern interpretation of the Stoic teachings of Epictetus, the former slave, and he was a sage-like philosopher who taught Marcus Aurelius, who of course is beloved for his meditations. I'm also known for a book I co-wrote quite some time ago with a Benedictine monk named Brother David Steindl-Rast, and it's called The Music of Silence, Entering the Sacred Space of Monastic Experience. This book describes how the daily rituals and rhythms of monastic life have much to offer those of us who are ensconced in the workaday world. And finally, I'm a performer and composer on a one-of-a-kind instrument that I had built for me. And it's a supersized hammer dulcimer, a giant trapezoidal shaped box with 100 strings that I strike with mallets. And I don't know how else to describe it. It just makes a holy sound that makes some people spontaneously cry. And it had a similar effect on me when I first heard a smaller version of it decades ago. And it was at that time that I made a spontaneous vow that I would learn it, I would play it, and I would share its ethereal sound. Anyhow, today I'm not here as author or musician or as the popularizer of philosophical ideas, but really as a fellow voyager. I'm typically not a big talker. That's not a personal policy, but more natural proclivity, because I do most of my thinking very slowly as I hike or as I read or as I write by hand or as I play my instrument. Sometimes when I'm on my yoga mat, pushing out my poses and submitting my will to that repetitive process. Those are my, I don't know, those are my think spaces. The one last thing I'll say about myself is I'm a big fan of non-digital activity and culture. For instance, each day I hand write a letter to the first person who comes to mind. And I seal that letter with old-fashioned sealing wax. This is a purposeful inefficiency that helps me slow down the gears of my mind to the speed of life. Anyhow, I'm grateful to Simon for asking me to be part of the walled garden. And I'm grateful already for what I've learned from Simon and Kai Whiting and Jake Bush. Above all, I'm here with a deliberately innocent mind to share ideas and to learn from all of you, this growing, marvelous motley group. It's an interesting experiment to see if deep connections really can be fostered within the virtual world. This is all new territory for me. So to give you an idea of what I imagine the walled garden can be, I'm going to share some short, what to call them, contemplations, meditations, meant to point to the walled garden's promise. And each of these contemplations can stand alone, but they will interpenetrate the others. We'll see how many I do. If I run out of steam early, I'll stop early. I see the walled garden as a place for sanctuary, a place for contentment, a place for stillness, a place to love first, a place for words to be carefully exchanged, and a place for virtue to flourish, a place for joy, a place for welcome. Come on in as you are. So these many kind of impromptu meditations will be interspersed, perhaps, with some unplanned, improvised music, if I find it necessary to express what doesn't fit into words. So let me begin. Before I set about learning something by myself or with others, I like to deliberately focus, to set an intention. And so I thought I'd begin with a non-denominational invocation that actually Amy here knows. It's translated from a Hebrew prayer by our friend Danny Nichols. And I think it's universal in its effect. It goes like this. I thank you for my life, body and soul. Help me realize that I'm beautiful and whole, that I'm perfect the way I am, and a little broken too. I will live each day as a gift I give to you. Okay, first contemplation, sanctuary. I see the walled garden as a sanctuary for meaning making, which I equate with holiness, irrespective of religion. So here are some thoughts on sanctuary, shelter, and the posture of the poet. Meaning making is the chief human enterprise. Against the backdrop of an apparently indifferent universe, we have to make life mean. That's our mandate. And we have the choice of what kinds of meanings to make. My hope is that the walled garden will be a sanctuary where we can meet raw and unself-defended within the unstable, but hopefully comforting embrace of not knowing. That this can be a place of exchange that welcomes hunches and half-baked but promising ideas, not the ideas that already have spit and polish on them, and a place for respect of mystery and possibility. Above all, I hope this will be a place to receive and a place to give. I see the walled garden as a sanctuary we visit for a brief date with ourselves to strengthen that inner connection and to strengthen our connection with each other, knowing that if there is any such a thing as holiness, I believe it lives in our connections, in relationship. And we are here to strengthen our connection with the mystery of life itself, which by luck or design, we get to inhabit and share. I've observed that the way we strengthen our connections with self, with the universe, and with others is by paradoxically letting go, unclenching, unclinging, trusting, stepping out in wild faith, unprotected. One of the best ways to let go and thereby make a hospitable home for meaning is by getting beyond words, beyond language's literal meanings, to something more expansive and embracing at the same time. By letting go into this special time that we've carved out together, and by letting go into philosophical discourse, poetry, art, or music, we're going to get to visit spaces and possibilities that are not always available when we're operating in the world with our solutions-oriented mind. Besides music, which is my second language, poetry, though it employs words, is one of those mediums that can loosen our hold on language with its grammar, syntax, and sometimes limiting literalism. Recently, really uncharacteristically, I've been reading poems, specifically the poetry of Mary Oliver. And I've been thus reminded of poetry's special powers to, for lack of a better word, unliteralize my thinking. Unliteral thinking is a kind of prayerful state, a state where faith matters more than facts, and where a profusion of unsought meanings are on offer. Maybe our lives themselves are poems, if we would let them be. Just a thought. So this is a shout out to poetry as a way of life or thinking, and a tribute to its transgressive and fortifying powers. Because when we need to refreshen our brains from time to time, poetry is just the thing to catapult us out of the literal into the possible, into the dream, into the suppose, the suppose. Poetry changes our frames of meaning, and its cousin, I think, is prayer. Simon himself has ably shown us this when he shared his poetry with us. The holy texts of our world's faith traditions could be said to be extended poems, as are prayer books. They're full of language that go beyond denotation to evocation and provocation, to being an instrument of personal transformation, because they reshuffle meanings and invite new ones. The value of poetry, both reading it and writing it, it acts as a disruptor to our rigid, stale categories. By writing and reading poetry, our brains can be busted open and forced, in a good way, to reorganize themselves, to extract meaning from a text. Holy books and some of the best philosophical books can be seen as large cyclical poems with infinite meanings happening in each instance of the text. Words that provoke and evoke rather than conclusively designate and thereby stagnate. So, I think poetry is heresy, and it's good heresy because it makes us reorder our worlds afresh. Poetry asks rather than tells. It suggests, it points, like all poignant gestures that send a shiver up our spines. Poetry doesn't ask if something is true. It asks, what does it mean? What might it mean? Poetry pokes holes in our brain's tired habits, which can get us into trouble with all or nothing thinking. All those snooty binaries of bad, good, the deadly binaries that create war, separation, suspicion, most of all, loneliness. Poetry, like music, allows life to express itself on its own terms. Poetry, like prayer, is a gateway to revelation. So just as the walled garden can be viewed as a sanctuary, it can be a place of shelter from the abrasive workaday world. It can be a place of hospitality and joy with an intensified appreciation for the ephemerality of all of life's gifts and endowments. And this in turn fosters a deepened gratitude for all that we have now. The people we love, our homes, everything that shelters us from life's vicissitudes. Because we know in our hearts that we are always vulnerable. We're always vulnerable. And yet we can be grounded in a faith in the goodness, the essential goodness of life's losses, shifts, and changes. They are expressions of the logos, after all, of nature itself. The writer Michael Strassfeld says, we must take the security of the shelter with us when we go into the outside world in our everyday lives. We need it not just for self-protection, but for a deep sense of security that frees us to relate to others. Whether we carry a suit of armor that encumbers our encounters on, what I'm trying to say is, without it, without this shelter, we carry a suit of armor that encumbers our encounters on the road. And as a shelter, the walled garden can be a reminder to not become entombed in our homes, literal and metaphorical, a reminder of a different kind of shelter, a shelter made of openness and faith. So here I put in mind of the famous poem by William Blake. I've always loved this. He who binds himself a joy does the winged life destroy. But he who kisses the joy as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise. When we inhabit the shelter of the walled garden, we will hold life's bounty alongside its transitoriness. This reminds us that the little things are actually the big things. And what do I mean by that? Typically, our culture celebrates the standouts, acts of exceptional heroism, culminative moments like graduations, or the reception of awards and accolades. But it's really the unsung, unheralded little things that have the biggest, deepest impact on ourselves, our families, our friends, our communities, and the world itself. And what are those little things? What are they? They're the small but steadily and repeatedly performed actions, such as taking the child to school every day, making our beds, treating all whom we meet with kindness, cooking meals, tending the garden, volunteering at that organization, hugging someone who obviously needs one. All these supposedly small or mundane acts form a strong chain of meaning that sustains and shelters us. And in the fullness of time, these small things add up to a through line of strength and meaning across time and geography. These small acts in the aggregate can save lives. They can provide the moral structures that hold up our communities. They provide hope and the will to prevail during our darkest hours and deepest griefs. One foot after the other, doing these small things. Writing that letter, taking that walk, cooking that meal, painting that room, calling that person, singing that song. The idea that the small things are the big things is beautifully expressed in this poem by Robert Louis Stevenson. The best things are the nearest. Breath in your nostrils, light in your eyes, duties at your hand, the path right before you. Do not grasp at the stars, but do life's plain common work as it comes, certain that daily duties and daily bread are the sweetest things in life. I think they really are. Okay, I've talked a good while here. I'm going to play a short musical interlude here. I did not prepare pieces. I'm flying without a net to encourage you to do so when you are within the spaces of the walled garden. In other words, come as you are, not as you wish to seem to be. And when I play this music, I hope you'll just give yourselves a few minutes to abstain from building, abstain from trying, making, planning, and to just let go into these sounds. Let shelter, joy, connection with others, the beautiful majesty of life's ever-changing flow wash over you. This is what I call the big amazing. Allow yourself to settle in and quiet down for just a few moments so that you can be embraced and held up by the shelter of the big amazing. I'll just play a little bit. There's a lot more I could say. I've got lots inside, but I'm going to stop. I just want to look at all of you. It's a joy to be with you. Thank you for letting me be with you.
Well, I guess all I can say is that now you see why I say that Sharon knows how to hit the target with everything that she does. Sharon, I'm hoping that when Jake manages to get down there to California, he might help you to record that song that you just played, and perhaps even have that as a second option for an introduction to the podcast. Because I mean, I've made my music for the podcast. Perhaps we could have some of that as well. I think that would be beautiful. But I think something that you said there, I'm always paying attention to specific sentences that jump out at me. One of the things that you have talked about in this session is suppose. You taught me this principle of suppose, ponder, sit with an idea. That has been one of the most valuable ideas anybody has ever taught me, is just to be able to sit with an idea, not to say yes, not to say no. But something that you said that I'm going to sit with for a long time is come as you are, not as you wish to seem to be. And I think that the reason that sticks out to me is because it's been one of the things that has got me into the most trouble in life. It has been wishing to seem to be something other than what I am right now. And I think if people went back and listened to the whole of my, episodes of the Practical Stoic podcast, what they would see is somebody trying to get away from that. Somebody who's definitely started as the here I am, stoic guy, trying to get away from that and to just be exactly what I am. And I just want to express to everybody that, Sharon, you have probably done more for me than anyone in my life in terms of getting me to be who I am, not who I wish to seem to be. And that's why I'm so excited to have you a part of this project. Is I think that you're going to be able to do that for many, many, many more people, as you probably already have. So I just want to thank you for sharing your wise words. And I'm just going to open it up to anybody else who wants to ask a question, give a comment, fire away.
What's on your mind, Kai?
Two things. I think it would be nice to have that piece of music. If we do like recordings of like the events that we're doing for the members, I really think that music deserves to be on that kind of thing. So, I mean, we said about the podcast, but I'm thinking like, we have like, we said like, let's say on Wednesdays, Kai and Simon do a talk on something. I think it'd be really nice if that music was for the people in the garden, because it is for the people in the garden. That's what it was about. So I was quite like, I don't know, Simon, if that can be arranged, but I think if we did it for those sort of members only events, to have that music start and end, I think that would be really encapsulating what Sharon was expressing.
Great idea.
The only other comment I have, Sharon, is I love it when everyone says the so-called meaningless universe, because as Stoics, the logos is meaning. It's not a Stoic claim. So,
you're right. That's a very important thing that you've just said. It really is. Yeah. We can feel that the universe is indifferent to us. That's a feeling. Yeah.
So I mean, you wasn't saying it wasn't for your benefit that I was saying that, but a lot of people say yes, this so-called meaningless, and the Stoics will say no, it's meaning. It's natural law.
Yes.
It's not Thomas Aquinas. There's not God, and then there's natural law, as in natural law is created by God. It is God from the Stoic perspective. So I always love it when, again, the agnostic or the atheistic leaning Stoic will say this so-called meaningless universe, or this meaningless, or I'm like, then virtue can't be the only good. Then it's just because it's pointless. Why did you come to that? So I just really enjoyed the fact that I could, we can smile at that and say this is precisely why we want to put these seeds down the garden. Of course, if people have atheistic and agnostic interpretations, that's perfectly fine, and they're welcome to the garden. But they will always have me at least poke about the cognitive dissonance that I discussed last week. So yeah, of course you can do that. You're going to suffer cognitive dissonance. So I just thought it was just wonderful that you were making that point to say the so-called, because exactly the Stokes would say, yes, the so-called. And I thought that was just wonderful. But thank you for that music. I thought was that I really hope we can capture that. At least in the recording, you can then work out what notes you played and remember them, because I think it would be really nice to have an excellent rendition of that. It was such a beautiful piece. So thank you very much.
I have a confession about that piece. While I was speaking, my son Noah, who doesn't live in this area, suddenly appeared at my door, and he was holding a big bag full of mushrooms because he's a mushroom forager, and he wanted to share these mushrooms with me, and I had to regretfully kind of shoo him away. And the thing is, that little tune was written in his honor, and that's why it came to me to play. It's called Noah's Nocturne.
Beautiful.
And later on, I
love
owe him
everything
a big
about that
apology, because he came, the good boy, to bring his mama some beautiful mushrooms he'd found in the forest.
That is the seeds of the walled garden, isn't it? It was because of mushrooms, of all things.
Yes.
That's the logos working, in my view.
Yes. Well, my friends, it's like I say, it's pleasure and privilege. I'm happy if anyone wants to say anything else, but sometimes it's good just to hold something and not have it be diluted by a lot of chat. Whatever you like. Simon, it's your call.
Well, I think I can probably speak for everyone. I think you've said it all, and I'm really grateful for what you've shared with us today. And I think I also speak for everybody in saying that if your son has just arrived with a whole bunch of mushrooms, it might be time for you to head off and see your son, and we're more than happy to take a break a little bit early today. So I do want to thank everybody for showing up today. So yes. Thank you for being here, and it's been an honor to listen to Sharon, and there will be more opportunity in the future for extended dialogue, but let's let Sharon get to her son and her mushrooms. Let's do that.
Thank you, everyone. It's really beautiful to be with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Thanks so much.
Okay. Bye for now, but love always.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to the Walled Garden podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd invite you to subscribe so you don't miss out on new episodes posted weekly. If you are interested in gaining access to a wide range of additional content and participating directly in our discussions, visit us at thewalledgarden.com to see what different membership options have to offer. Thanks again, and we hope to have you back.